You are listening to the Disney Dream Girls, an unofficial Disney Theme Parks podcast, and this is show number 391, the Sunday, the 9th of January 2022.
Where dreams begin.
Well, hello and welcome to this week's Disney Dream Girls. My name is Michelle Young, and together with my jolly good chum Jayne Phipps, we are your guides to the place where dreams begin. This week is a little different. I have got a bumper trip report for you. We are joined today by the wonderful, the lovely Linda Walker. Sadly, no Jayne, but I'd like to welcome Linda to the Disney Dream Girls.
Hello, Michelle. Thank you for the warm welcome. It's lovely to be here.
Do you know, my lovely, I am just thinking back, we actually met up, didn't we, in Walt Disney World, and it's a fair few years back now.
It is, my goodness. I can't even remember when that was. And I can remember very specifically you were dressed as Snow White and you looked absolutely incredible. And I think I just ran up to you at the Polynesian and said, Michelle? And you said yes. And then we chatted on the monorail on the way to Magic Kingdom for the Halloween party.
Yes, that was it. Was going on the same night, weren't we? We'd just been in Trader Sam's, so we were probably a little bit sozzled, should we politely say, that we'd been in there for an hour and a half. And yes, that was probably 2018, lovely.
Yes. It seems like a lifetime ago already, doesn't it? So much has changed since then.
I know. Anyway, so that we get a flavour of you, so that we know a little bit about you and your Disney. Which theme parks have you been to in the past, or cruises, or anything Disney connected? And how did you get into being a Disney fan?
Oh my goodness. So yeah, I've been to California, I've been to Orlando, and I've been to Paris. So they're the three Disney parks that I've been to across the years. Cruise line, I'm a platinum cruiser. Absolutely love cruising. I think I'm up to about 21 cruises now. So I've done quite a few, but love Disney Cruise Line. And I think, how did I get into it? I think like many kids growing up, I love the Disney films as a child, and my mum and dad would take me to the cinema if one was on. This was way before you could be watching Disney Plus and getting films streamed direct to your house. So, but I wouldn't say I was a Disney fan as such. And then it would have been in the early 90s. Myself and my boyfriend, who is now my husband, were looking to do our first big holiday together. We'd done a few sort of weekends away and European trips, and we decided we would love to go to the US. And then we started to browse and literally went to the travel agents and got brochures pre-internet. Happened to pick up the Virgin Holidays brochure, spotted Disney in there, and I don't know, a little light bulb went off, and I thought that just sounds like a really fun trip without really knowing a huge amount about Disney World. Anyway, very long story short, we went, completely fell in love with the place, and have been going back ever since as often as we can. And we're DVC members now as well. So we just love it. And, time off permitting, I go as often as I can. And, I go with my husband probably once or twice a year. But if I can sneak in the odd solo trip, which is what I did in December, I absolutely do that as well. But it's the parks for me, definitely, more than it is the films or anything else right now. But I just love it.
And it's interesting you say you go quite a lot on your own as well. And I think those trips are very different, aren't they, when you're going with a group or with your husband or with friends, to that trip where you're on your own, because you can be utterly selfish and please yourself 100% of the time.
Absolutely. And, when I'm on a solo trip, I mean, you may call it selfish. It probably is selfish, but I've got nobody to worry about other than me. So if I want to be standing outside the gates for park opening at 7:30 in the morning and walk out at 12:30 the following morning, I will do, and it's exhausting, and I would never want to put anybody else through that if they had aching feet. And my obsession in terms of rides is the Haunted Mansion, and I would happily just sit on that and do back-to-back rides for an entire night, and just stand outside and look at it for 30 minutes before I even get on and ride it. So nobody else is probably going to do that. And I love going with friends, I love going with my husband, but there is something really quite fun about doing a solo trip and just pleasing yourself.
No, I totally agree, and I have got so many fond memories of doing my own thing, and it's exactly the same. I'd go on Tower of Terror over and over and over. I think my record in a day is 8 times, whereas my
Wow.
husband probably would not be very pleased to go on it even once, because our first trip, he turned around and says, you don't want to bother with that, it's not very good. Yeah,
How wrong he is.
he suffered for that comment for years now, I will let you know. So you mentioned you went in December. So obviously we're in the middle of a COVID-19 pandemic. So let's just talk a little bit to start with. How did you actually get the green light to be able to board the plane and to get off and get to Disney with all the rules and regulations? Because to me it sounds an absolute minefield of day testing, this test, that test, what proof, and etc.
I mean, I think, yourself, Michelle, and probably everybody who's going to be listening to this podcast was so desperate to get back to Disney. And I've had multiple trips cancelled. And basically, every time a flight got cancelled, I would just bump it back a couple of months or keep an open ticket. And then I'd rebook another time. And so things kept moving. And so when I finally heard the news that the borders were going to reopen on November the 8th, after I'd finished doing backflips around the house and cracking open the champagne, I realised that I had a trip booked for November 3rd, which was obviously pre the borders opening. But as a backup, I had a trip booked for early December. So I actually ended up bumping back the November flight to next year and keeping that December trip. And then, from that point where I thought, okay, the borders are opening, this is happening, you do end up spending more time than you would want to reading about travel rules. The thing with travel rules is they can change at any time. And I really did experience that in that the rules changed a couple of weeks before I flew out there. One of the rules changed whilst I was on the flight on the way to Orlando. So you've got to be on your toes and you've got to be prepared for that. And you've got to accept it, that it's part of travel right now, that you do have to jump through a few hoops and you have to be prepared for last minute changes. Make sure your travel insurance is in place to cover you if, heaven forbid, you can't go because of COVID or something happens. You want to make sure that you're well covered. But for me to get there, it's actually relatively straightforward in terms of what you have to present to the airline. So it was a observed lateral flow test, which could be taken no more than 3 days before you flew to the US. That has now changed to 1 day, but I managed to get out there just before that rule change happened. I did a virtual appointment where it was self-administered. It was just like the NHS test that you probably all used to doing yourselves at home. They watch you do it. They verify your identity. You have to take a picture of the negative test cassette, whatever you would call them. I guess you call them a cassette. Next to your passport, you upload it, and then they send you a certificate back, which you can then present to the airline to get on your flight. You also have to prove that you are double vaccinated, and you can do that with just getting the certificate off the NHS app. And both of those things can be uploaded. I flew with Virgin. You can upload both of those documents before you get to the airport. I printed them anyway, took them with me in case anybody asked to see them so I could show them. I also had them saved on my phone. I had, backup after backup after backup to make sure I had everything. And then the other thing you have to do is sign I can never say this word, attestation form is I believe what they call it. And again, I could do that all at the point of online check-in with Virgin. I could complete that. And that is basically attesting to the fact that you are fully vaccinated and you have tested negative. And that is all you basically need to get into the US at the moment. But then, of course, there's UK rules and regulations about having to book a test for the day 2 when you get back. And whilst I was on the flight on the way out there, the rules changed to say that you had to do a test before you got on the flight to come home. So I had to book a test in Orlando to get me back on the plane to get me home as well. So, a couple of changes, very last minute and actually during the trip, but all easy to navigate.
Okay. I did hear from one of our friends who was over in Walt Disney World that there are places that you can go and get those tests for free.
Yeah.
So that's good.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, because the rule change happened whilst I was on the flight, and as soon as I landed, my phone got about 3 or 4 messages on it from friends saying, have you seen, you've got to do a test in Orlando now. I really didn't want to spend the whole trip worrying about it and thinking, where am I going to get tested? And, what kind, sort of asking myself a million questions and spending every day looking at Google, when I should be in Disney having fun. So I just made the decision there and then, right, this is the type of test I need. Where is there locally that does those types of tests? I found somewhere, they had excellent reviews. I think it was $80. And I just booked it for right at the end of my trip at a time that suited me and forgot about it. Not forgot about it in as much as I was obviously cautious all trip. I didn't want to catch COVID while I was out there. But yes, if I'd have spent a bit of time and effort and looked at the forums for a few days, I probably could have found these free places. But for me, that was just peace of mind. I had it booked. Next time I go, I probably won't pay for it. I will go to one of the free places. But that worked for me in that situation.
Right. Now we've done all the admin and all the boring stuff that we have to do. Let's talk the good stuff. 10 nights, solo trip. Where did you decide to use your DVC points? Or did you use DVC? Did you book a hotel? Where did you stay?
So, I stayed at Coronado Springs, which isn't a DVC resort, so I didn't use my points. And the main reason for that was because my dates throughout the past 2 years with COVID have been swapping and changing and moving. That's quite difficult to manage with Disney Vacation Club. So I made the decision to book a cash stay direct with Disney because it gave me enormous flexibility for changing dates, or if I had to cancel it was easy to do. Whereas with the DVC points, that isn't quite as straightforward. So I booked a stay at Coronado Springs, which was the first time I'd stayed there. I'd visited there once before because I'd had a drink at the Dahlia Lounge in Grand Destino Tower, which is a fabulous lounge, which I highly recommend. So I had a little walk around the resort previously and thought, I like it. This is the sort of place I'd want to stay, but I'd never actually stayed there. And I loved it and would stay there again in a heartbeat. I think it's a very adult resort. I didn't really see many kids around the resort at all. And I think one thing to keep in mind, because it might bother some people, is there is a convention centre attached to the resort. So you do see people on work trips and you do sort of walk through the lobby and there are people with laptops. That doesn't really bother me, but I just wanted to put that out there because for some people that doesn't feel very Disney. But I had a beautiful room. I was in the Casitas, which was a preferred king room. So I was very close to everything. I might have had a different opinion of the resort if I was in one of the other buildings because it's huge and there's either 3 or 4 bus stops. There's a lot of bus stops. If I was staying right at the back of the resort, I might not have thought so kindly of it. But because I was close to everything, close to Grand Destino Tower, close to the buses, easy to get an Uber from the front of the building. And there are a lot, because it's a convention centre, there's a lot of places to eat and drink, and they are open relatively late at night compared to some Disney resorts, which is why I say it was more of an adult kind of resort. But yeah, loved it. Very quiet room, great location, and would stay there again, definitely.
Just stepping to one side for a moment, with you being a DVC member, how have you managed with not having so many trips over the last few years with regards to your points? Are Disney honouring and letting them roll over, or have you lost any?
Fortunately, so far, I haven't lost any. Disney have been very good at letting us. There were some points which I couldn't roll over, so I actually rented those out. I booked a reservation for a family in America. You can do this through agencies, and I would recommend that because then you've got cover and sort of guarantee that the deal will go through in contracts and everything else. So I actually booked a reservation for a family at the Polynesian and so rented some points out. Other points they have allowed me to roll forward into next year, 2022. So I have a lot of points in 2022, which I am going to have to use. So I have plenty of trips booked using them next year. But no, I haven't lost any. So I've been quite lucky in that because I know that some people have.
That sounds good because not only were you able to reap some financial benefit, but another family had a fantastic time at the Polynesian.
Exactly. And the money that I got from renting that went towards paying for Coronado Springs. So
perfect. So let's move on now to talk a little bit about your trip.
Yes.
I was so excited looking at your pictures as you were posting away over there, and there was one thing out of everything you talked about that I got really, really excited about, because I went to university, I'm an educated woman, but if I would have had the opportunity to go to a university called the University of Sangria, I'd have got so excited. So please tell us everything about this.
Yeah, this really was one of the highlights of the trip. It's a fantastic experience, and I would say to anybody who can get themselves booked onto it, do it, because it's a lot of fun. It's great value for money, and it's well worth doing. I just by chance, because it's not something that I'd heard about hugely before, but by chance I was reading somebody's blog and they'd mentioned it, and I thought, well, that sounds interesting, and hopefully I'm staying there soon. So I read about it and thought, this sounds incredible. And at that point, you actually had to email Coronado Springs to book yourself on to a class. I'm using quotations when I say that. So I emailed them. They asked me what dates I was going. They only do it 2 days a week. I think it's a Friday and a Saturday, or a Saturday and a Sunday. It's just at weekends. And they emailed me right back and they said, actually, for your dates, we are moving to putting reservations in the My Disney Experience app. So you will be able to book it through the app from whatever date it was, mid-November, you could book it through the app. So I kept checking back and they were right. I did manage to do that. So it is now available as a dining reservation in the app for anybody trying to book it, which I believe you can book it 60 days, as with most reservations. I hear that it sells out every single weekend. It's really popular. So definitely worth getting in on that straight away if it's something you're interested in. But yeah, as I said, it was absolutely fantastic. The cast members that ran it were typical Disney cast members, full of enthusiasm, looked like they were excited to be there, very welcoming, made the whole experience really fun, weaved the education about the drinks in with some Disney history as well, which made it even more special. And the setting for this at Coronado Springs is the Three Bridges Bar and Grill, which is right in the middle of the water at the centre of the resort. So the views are fantastic. It's a gorgeous setting, a wonderful restaurant. Even if you're not doing this Sangria University, you should absolutely go there for drinks and appetizers one evening, because it's a wonderful bar lounge. And we got to try many different types of sangria. I must admit, I didn't know a huge amount about sangria at all, but now I've decided it's one of my favourite drinks. And they talked you through the ingredients and you tried each one in turn. And the whole way they presented the drinks was fantastic. They sort of delivered them in this sort of sangria tower where the necks of the glasses were all held within this tower. So the presentation was fantastic as well. And then for the sort of final flourish, your final drink, the cast members came around to each table and asked you to pick what type of sangria you would like to concoct for yourself. So using everything you'd learned, would you like a white, a red, a rosé, a sparkling as your base? What liqueur would you want in there? What fruits do you want in there? And then they went off and then came back and presented you with that drink a few short minutes later, so you could try your own creation. I don't know if previously maybe you went up to the bar and did that yourselves, and in COVID times obviously that's not really possible for them to do because they made those drinks for you. But it was fabulous, and all in all it was about a 2-hour experience. They presented you with a certificate of graduation at the end of it, whilst they announced everybody, they did a whole sort of ceremony, they played music, and then they took everybody's pictures with a nice sort of photo prop of I've graduated Sangria University. It was just a lot of fun. It was a really, really good way to spend an afternoon. And it was only a 5-minute walk back to my room, so...
So not only you can add this and embellish your CV, it's a qualification. And I've just learnt something brand new, because my memories of sangria are very fuzzy, but being in Spain with a big jug of something red, I didn't even know you could get white and rosé sangria. So I've learnt something already from you.
Yeah, absolutely. And Disney were also saying, look, we have a little bit of artistic license with what we call sangria and what we don't. And I'm sure that if there was any Spanish in the audience, they would say that is not sangria, but either way, it was all delicious.
And it's a different way of enjoying Disney. You know, when you're going as a frequent visitor and on a solo trip, it's sort of an icebreaker where you can go and enjoy it on your own. You don't, you know what I mean? It sounds brilliant.
Yeah, it really was good. It was very similar, and I know you've done them, Michelle, to the tastings you do on Disney Cruise Line.
Mm.
Yeah, you arrive as a solo guest, but you definitely don't leave as a solo guest, because after everybody's had 5 glasses of sangria, we're all great friends. So struck up some wonderful conversations with the tables either side of me, and yeah, I had a great time.
The only problem I would have is finding my way back to my room after having 5 glasses of sangria. I would really, really struggle, but sounds absolutely fabulous. And thank you for sharing. And I know you've posted pictures, so I will acquire and put on our website so that people can have a look at the beautiful presentation as well.
Yeah, definitely.
After we've talked a little bit about the alcohol, which is a big part of going to Disney when you are an adult, because, you know, you're allowed. Let's talk a little bit about the actual Disney and going on attractions. And you have already alluded to a bit of a love of a particular attraction.
Yeah, my absolute dream attraction, I just love it, is the Haunted Mansion. When I got off the flight in Orlando and I headed to Coronado Springs, I pretty much threw my bag in the room, got on a bus, went to Magic Kingdom just so I could go and ride Haunted Mansion. I was terribly jet lagged, but that was all I wanted to do, was just get there and ride it, because I'd missed it hugely. I just love that ride. And I had a little bit of pixie dust actually on the way into the park. I had a annual pass voucher that I'd had on my Disney Experience account for what seems like forever, that obviously I'd never been able to activate. So I went to guest services, had a wonderful cast member to help me activate my annual pass. And we were chatting and he asked me when I arrived, and I said about 2.5 hours ago, which he thought was insane. And he was saying, what's the time difference? And I was telling him, and he was saying, well, you know, you're obviously very keen to get in. And I said, because I want to ride Haunted Mansion. All I've thought about for the last 2 years is getting back in and riding Haunted Mansion. And he wished me a good evening. And just as I was walking away, he said, oh, by the way, I've popped a lightning lane for Haunted Mansion onto your ticket, so you don't have to wait to ride it. And I think that was the moment where that's when it hit, and that's when I got emotional. It wasn't when I saw the castle, funnily enough. It wasn't when I walked into the park. It was that one person at guest services doing that, which was a small thing. And I'm sure the wait for, I can't even remember what the wait was for Haunted Mansion. And I don't think it was that long, but to me, it meant the absolute world. So yeah, that was my first experience of going back. And I walked in the park, walked up Main Street, turned left, went on Haunted Mansion.
Absolute perfect start to the holiday. And as you say, those little touches that Disney do, they don't have to, and you don't go there expecting them. But when you get surprised with something like that, it just, as you say, tears yes. of joy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how many times do you reckon you rode your favourite on the holiday?
Oh, I don't know. Somebody asked me this yesterday, and I don't know. I didn't keep count. I would think it would be probably about 10, so not that excessive, I don't think. I did one of the after hours events, so I managed to ride it quite a few times during that, because it was literally just a walk on. But I think, and I'm sure we'll get to this, it was very busy in the park, so it was hard to just walk on to anything. Mm-hmm. There was usually a very long wait time. But yeah, I got plenty of in. It was my first ride of the trip, and it was my last ride of the trip.
Perfection. So you just mentioned the after hours event. Before COVID hit, Disney had started introducing these events where you could pay X amount of money and get the park at a lot quieter level. But with COVID times and wanting to sort of utilise the crowds that would normally attend for the Halloween and Christmas party, Disney were a little bit creative. So would you like to explain a bit about the after hours event you ended up booking and enjoying?
Yes, I mean, I suppose it was, if anybody's done the Christmas party before, it was a sort of a stripped down version of that. It wasn't quite as long and there wasn't quite as much going on, but it was a bit more akin to the parties than the traditional after hours, because they did have the Christmas parade, the Christmas fireworks, they had the Christmas castle show, they had the sort of, you know, the Christmas lighting effects, and they had free cocoa and cookies. And so there was those elements of the traditional Christmas party, but it wasn't the full experience. And the very last time I went to Disney World was 2 years ago in December 2019, it would have been. Yeah. And I did the Christmas party then. So I was really comparing like for like, because that was my very last time in Disney World. So it wasn't quite as full as an experience of that, but it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. I thought the fireworks were fabulous. And I turned up for the fireworks 10 minutes before they started and got an absolute perfect spot. Same with the castle show, turned up 5 minutes before it started, stood wherever I wanted. The crowds were very light, but this is a very, very expensive ticket. It was a sold out night when I was there, I should add, but everything was pretty much a walk on if you wanted to do attractions. My priority that night was just to enjoy the park at a quieter time, experience as much of the Christmas things as I could, and get my cookie and cocoa and, you know, just enjoy the festive atmosphere, watch the parade, watch the fireworks. And then I just picked off a couple of rides as I was walking around.
Okay. At the end of the day, it's each to everybody's own, isn't it? It's working out if paying that little bit of extra to get a little bit of more of the parks is going to be worthwhile. And I suppose with us that may not realise when we're next going to get there. So to have that ability to ride and get a really massive Disney hit for a few $100, it might be worthwhile that.
Yeah, and as you say, you know, everybody has to make that decision for themselves. I tend not to look back and say, okay, that cost, it was over $200. I think it was very expensive. Did I feel like I got value? Because I think you just drive yourself crazy if you do that. So all I do is think, did I have fun tonight? Yes, I did. And that's, you know, that's kind of how I measure it. Now, it's very different being, you know, a single rider, so to speak, than having a family to pay for. Because if you were paying for a family of 4 to do that, it's just too expensive. But for me, just being on my own and wanting to see the Christmas fireworks, it felt, you know, I had a good night. That was the thing. Whether it was worth the money, that's sort of the jury's out on that one. But it was certainly a very enjoyable evening. And I closed the park down. I was the very last person to ride Haunted Mansion. I got a private stretching room. I was the last dune buggy of the night. So to me, that kind of paid for it, really. Just doing that was enough.
You can't put a price on those types of experiences, can you?
No, not at all.
And it's subjective, isn't it? I bought my husband the big Lego monstrous castle, and that was like £300. And I've had people say, what? But for us, we get the value because we look at it every day. It's in my study. It's opposite where I'm sat now. And I get the pleasure and enjoyment, and he had the pleasure and enjoyment of building it for me. So...
Exactly. Yeah, to use a well-used, it's you do you, isn't it? You know, you do what makes you happy. And if you can afford it and you want to do it, go for it. But for anybody who just thinks, whoa, that's far too expensive, don't feel like you are missing out or you're not going to have a great holiday, because you can absolutely have a great holiday without paying for all these extras.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about paying for extras, and let's have a little bit of a discussion about Genie Plus and Lightning Lanes.
Yes, so that was all completely new to me on this trip. Obviously, when I went previously, it was the old Fast Pass Plus, and you would be making your 3 Fast Passes a day and then working your way through making some more if you could. So Genie Plus was a whole new experience for me, and I'd read up quite a bit about it before I went, and I'd watched some people's YouTube vlogs, and to be honest, it was just really confusing me. But I will say to anybody who's going through that right now and reading about it and trying to work it all out, when you get there and you have your phone in your hand and you open the app, it's actually quite straightforward. It's pretty intuitive. Don't worry too much is my point there, that you can't, you know, master it before you get on the plane to fly out there, because you'll soon get into the swing of it. Couple of things to know. I do have data on my phone when I'm in the US, and I had to use it because the Wi-Fi was patchy and it would drop out sometimes. If you haven't got data on your phone, just be prepared for maybe having to walk around the park a bit to find some decent Wi-Fi, and that can be frustrating if you've paid for something and you want to use it and you can't. So that's just something to keep in mind. I didn't use it every day. To me, Magic Kingdom and Hollywood Studios are your best values for Disney Plus. You really don't need to use it in Animal Kingdom or Epcot unless it's incredibly busy, because you can pretty much get through those rides without doing it, unless, as I say, you're there at a very busy time. But Magic Kingdom, when I used it there, I was just flying through the Genie Plus Lightning Lane reservations, and as soon as I redeemed one, I'd be on booking another thing I would say is, and I don't know if it's just the way that my brain is wired, when I've paid for something like that, I want to get the absolute, I want to make sure that I'm playing it right. I don't want to look back at the end of the day and think, oh, if I'd got that fast pass first instead of that one, it would have been a better day. So I did find, rather than particularly sitting back and enjoying my time and experience in Magic Kingdom, I spent probably too much time looking at my phone, working out what my next step might be and what strategically would work best. Can take a little bit away from the experience. So I think I might use it slightly differently when I go next time. But yeah, it's pretty straightforward to use. Love it or hate it, it's here to stay, and you have the choice. You can stand in the standby lines and just get through your day like that and not pay for it, or you can make the decision to pay for it. The only tip I think you need in advance is to know which attraction at each park you should go for first. So, for example, at Hollywood Studios, you need to get Slinky Dog immediately. So at 7 a.m., you've got to be on that app and making your Slinky Dog reservation, because by 7:05, there are none left for the day, or there certainly wasn't when I was there. Knowing which is the top ride in each park that you'll need a lightning lane for is good knowledge in advance.
And that's when you've paid the set fee to be able to utilise the ones that are on that set fee arrangement, regardless of then having to pay X amount of money per ride. Am I right?
Yes. So this is the $15 per day Genie Plus, and you can park hop with that. So you could start your day in Magic Kingdom and then park hop to Epcot in the evening and still use your Genie Plus to make reservations in Epcot. So that's where the value of it can really come into play. If you're park hopping, that could work really well for you. But then on top of that, you have the individual lightning lanes, which are an additional cost on top. So, for example, I paid for one of those for Rise of the Resistance because I really wanted to do it. It's an incredible attraction. I've been lucky enough to do it a few times in the past, but knew that I wanted to get on that attraction and knew that if I did it in standby, I would be standing there for, I saw the wait times at sort of 2 hours some days. So I did pay for that. And again, at 7 o'clock, once I'd made my Slinky Dog, I then made my Rise of the Resistance lightning lane. And with those, the individual paid ones are slightly different in that you can select what time you want to go, subject to availability, of course. So you can scroll through the times, a bit like you used to do with Fast Pass Plus, and think 11 o'clock in the morning will suit me, fine, I'm going to book that. Whereas when you do the Genie Plus lightning lanes that are included in your $15, it's just next available. So you can't tweak times around and things like that, which is a bit of a pain. But yeah, I did use it for the Rise of the Resistance. I think it was $15, so it was expensive. But for anybody who stood in Hollywood Studios staring at your phone trying to get a boarding group in the literal second you've got to secure it, at least it takes that stress away if you really want to do the ride.
It does sound very much like, to me, the Max Pass system that they had over in Disneyland, where you paid your set amount of money and then you could book Fast Pass after Fast Pass after Fast Pass after Fast Pass throughout the day, and you could probably get maybe 5 to 7 Fast Pass type attractions because you've paid for the Max Pass.
Exactly that, and I've used Max Pass in Disneyland, and you're right, it's very similar.
Okay, well, that's something for me to bear in mind when I get to go, because one of the things I've got to ride is Rise. I've not ridden it yet because when I was last in Disneyland, it hadn't opened. So for me, I will pay because, as you say, I'm not missing 2 to 3 hours of theme park time for the sake of $10-15. For me, the value is there to pay to get on that ride.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's well worth the money. That one is definitely worth the money.
Right. Well, we all know that a big part of Disney isn't the attractions. No, no, no. The attractions are just what you do in between all the food and the drinks. So let's talk some food, because I know you were incredibly excited about the possibility of trying out a few new places on this trip. And one of the places you were very excited about was Space 220.
Yes, yeah. I mean, again, it was a new restaurant to me. It wasn't open last time I went there. It is a very hard to get reservation. Again, if anybody wants it, they've got to be there on the button to book that dining reservation, because they go immediately. But I was lucky enough to get a dinner reservation there. It was actually on my last night, so it was quite a nice night to go and sort of, celebrate around Epcot and look back on the trip and how much I'd enjoyed it. It was an incredible experience. It's very expensive. I don't know if I want to give too much away for people who haven't been to the restaurant before, who maybe don't want any spoilers, but the whole way that you are greeted at the entrance and the whole way that you arrive at that space station restaurant is very cool. It's Disney magic at its best. And then when you are actually in the restaurant, the windows of the restaurant are like you are looking out into space. And excuse the pun, there's a wonderful atmosphere in the restaurant. There are spaceships floating gently past the window. There are meteors floating past the window. You'll see the occasional spaceman, space woman, space dog float past the window. So actually, as you're eating your meal, just looking out onto that as you are looking down on Earth is really spectacular. Possible you should ask for a table on the lower level. There's a couple of, I can't remember if there's 2 or 3 levels, but the lower level will put you closer to those wonderful space views.
Okay, well, I have the menu in front of me. The dinner is $79, and for that you get an appetizer, an entree and a sweet. But on top of that, you're able to enhance your main course as you wish with extras such as lobster or an upgraded steak. And then obviously on top of that, you may want the odd cocktail or two perhaps.
Oh, yes, and I did. So the drinks menu is fantastic because obviously they are all space themed. From the top of my head, I had 2, which was a little bit naughty, and they're very expensive. So I had one called Jupiter Fizz, which was a gin-based drink. And then I had another one called, I think it was called Galactic Cosmopolitan, which was basically a Cosmo with some sparkles on the top. So again, beautifully presented. Drinks look fantastic. They've all got really cool names. The kids' drinks look incredible as well. And they do a lot of non-alcoholic sort of cocktails as well that are a lot of fun, that will be foaming or smoking or, have some kind of theatre to them. So there's drinks for everybody, even if you don't want to partake in alcohol. And as you say, it's a fixed price menu. Pick your appetizer, your entree and your dessert. This is where I always think I don't get amazing value at things like this because I'm vegetarian. So there's usually only one option as a vegetarian, which there was in this restaurant. There was one vegetarian main course. So I had no choice but to have that. And it was fine. It was delicious. But you're probably not getting the value of the person on the table next to you that's got a fabulous steak in front of them.
Yeah.
And so whereby if you're picking off a menu a la carte, the vegetarian options are usually quite a bit less expensive. But when you're on a fixed price, you're paying for the experience, and it's an expensive meal. Everything I had was delicious. I had a grain salad for my starter, which was very enjoyable. And then I had it was a vegetarian sort of bolognese pasta dish. Again, it was great. And then for my dessert, I had a lemon cheesecake type affair that was beautifully presented. It had sort of white chocolate, sort of planetary rings around the top of it. So looked fantastic. The portion sizes were enormous. I didn't do any course justice. I didn't get halfway through any of them. So it's a lot of food. So if you've got a big appetite, it's a good restaurant to go to.
I'm just having a look at the vegetarian option that you went with, and it's got a cashew hummus, which is very intriguing to me as somebody who's, not really a fan of hummus, but to have it made with cashew nuts instead, that sounds really good.
Yeah, it was delicious. It was very good. I suppose what makes it a little bit of a one and done for me, that restaurant, is if I went back in February, which is when I'm hopefully going to Disney again, I would have to order pretty much exactly the same meal.
Hmm.
So I probably wouldn't want to do that. What I would love to do is try and get a reservation for their lounge, try some of the other cocktails, and maybe order an appetizer, which you can do in the lounge. So for me, that would be a much better dining experience. But I'm really glad I did it. It's the way that they have designed the restaurant, even the way that the staff are completely in character. You know, as far as the staff are concerned, they are in space, and so are you. So it's a lot of fun, and it's definitely worthwhile getting that reservation if you really want to do it.
And I do know my friend, good friend of the show, David Maruka, has just literally landed back from a trip, lightning trip if you like, and he actually went in the lounge and he said it was an absolute highlight of his trip. It was an amazing experience. And as you say, you get the best part of the entrance and the entry to the Space 220 environment, but you don't have to pay for the set meal, which dinner at $79, lunch at $55 for 2 courses. It's quite pricey, whereas you can be in the lounge, you can have a cocktail, and you can get something else, you know, a smaller snack type thing, and you get the environment. I think it's a definite you've got to go for it.
Yeah, yeah. I'm certainly going to be trying to get a reservation for the lounge.
Wonderful. While we're on the topic of food, you had a bit of a battle of the breakfasts, I gather.
I did. When we were chatting before we started recording about solo trips, and one of my little tips for solo trips is lounges are a great way of going for, you know, an evening meal, but also breakfasts are a great way of experiencing some restaurants without sort of feeling like you've got to sit there on your own at dinner time. So I particularly wanted to see the new Steakhouse 71 at the Contemporary Resort because I'd heard good things about the food, but I also loved that it got that nod to the nostalgia of the 50th anniversary and the opening of the park. And I'd heard there was some great artwork and photographs in the restaurant. So that really made me want to go there. And I thought, well, breakfast is actually one of my favourite meals. So I thought I'll go there for breakfast and try it. And it was 10 out of 10 fantastic. Great pricing compared to some of the other meals that I did when I was in Disney. Fantastic staff, lovely environment, and the food was excellent. Really, really good food. So I really enjoyed my time there. The other breakfast that I did was at Topolino's Terrace, which is actually a character meal. And again, I'd never been to the Riviera Resort. I wanted to see the Riviera Resort. I wanted to see that restaurant. Thought it'd be a nice opportunity to see the characters as well. It was good, but the food was nowhere near as good as Steakhouse 71. So it was a one and done for me. It was nice to see the characters. They do sort of socially distanced flybys by the tables. They don't actually stop at the tables as such, but you can grab a selfie if you want to. But the food for me was just not a patch on Steakhouse 71 and was at least twice the price, if not more, because you're paying for those characters. But I would like to go back there and try it for dinner when I'm there with my husband because I hear good things about the dinner there.
And looking at the menu over at Steakhouse 71 for breakfast, there are a couple of vegetarian options on there. So it's nice that you can have one and next time go and maybe try the other.
Yeah, exactly. And breakfast, I see I'm not vegan, so I eat eggs and I eat dairy. So breakfast is always a relatively straightforward meal for me to get something.
Yeah, you can't go wrong. And pancakes. Shall we just end the conversation on that?
Yes, absolutely.
You can never go wrong with a good pancake, and they can quite easily make it vegetarian by just removing the meat element of what's on the menu.
Exactly.
We know as a single traveller, both of us, that sometimes you don't really want to be sat at a dinner table for an hour and a half on your own, everybody looking at you thinking, why is she on her own over there? So I also do this, where I go to a lounge and I have a drink and I people watch and I grab some food. Where were your top favourite lounges you managed to sneak into and enjoy?
Right, so the absolute top lounge is the Nomad Lounge. I didn't even have to hesitate with my answer there. So the Nomad Lounge, if anybody doesn't know, is at Animal Kingdom and it's just near the entrance to Pandora. Definitely if the weather's right, try and get an outside table rather than inside because I just think it's such a beautiful spot to sit, whether you're there at lunchtime when it's light or after dark and you can hear the sounds of Pandora through the trees. It's just a fantastic lounge bar. The drinks are wonderful. The staff are fantastic. They do the most incredible Impossible Burger sliders in there, so a sort of vegetarian burger that are just the best. So yeah, the Nomad Lounge is absolutely my number one go-to lounge whenever I'm in Disney. I could talk about lounges for quite some time because I do have my favourites, but that was definitely a standout on that trip. But worth noting, previously when I've arrived at lounges, I've just turned up and said, have you got a table? And they may say, should have in about 10 minutes, or they might say, yep, go right in, help yourself. In fact, Nomad Lounge, you could just go and walk in and find an open table. You didn't even have to ask anybody. That's really changed since last time I was there. So for nearly all of the bars and lounges, it was the same at Hollywood Brown Darby's Lounge as well. You have to join a walk-up list on the My Disney Experience app. And then you get a push notification when your table's ready, which I was fine with because I could walk into the park, join the wait list, go off and do some attractions, go off and do some shopping. And then when I got my push notification, I would make my way. But you need to kind of factor in that extra time. So if you think you want to go to the Nomad Lounge on Tuesday night at 8 o'clock, you should be getting yourself on the wait list at sort of 6 o'clock when you enter the park. And if you get in a bit earlier, fine, but you can't just 5 minutes before you want to sit down and go in, try and get that spot. And it's the same with quick service restaurants. Mobile ordering is such a big thing now at Disney that they actively discourage or even prevent you completely from going into restaurants and ordering food at busy times. They want you to do everything through the app, get a push notification when it's ready, food's ready, and then you go and collect. But for lounges, definitely that's something to keep in mind, that you are going to have to join a walk-up list for all of them.
Fab. You're back in February? What's the plan for then?
Yeah, so hopefully, I mean, it's weird when you're looking forward to a trip at the moment because you almost daren't think, yeah, I'm definitely going in February, which I would have done previously. But, COVID permitting, travel rules permitting, I will be going early February. I'm finally getting to use some of the DVC points. I'm going to be staying at the Polynesian, which is one of our home resorts. And I have a 7-day trip booked. So not 10 nights this time, just 7 nights. Flying again with Virgin Atlantic. I'm probably going to pop over to Universal Studios one day because I did actually go to Universal on this December trip and I loved it. And so I might pop over there for a day again. But primarily it's just going to be spending time in the Disney parks. I think and I hope, and this is probably famous last words, that I take it a little bit steadier on this trip because I was opening parks and closing parks and walking back to my room absolutely shattered every single day because I was, I'd got this pent up enthusiasm for Disney and needed to see everything and do everything and go everywhere. So I'm hoping when I go back again, I'll be a little bit more chilled and take it a bit easier. And the Polynesian is a beautiful resort to do that.
Completely agree, although I've never stayed there. I've only walked and eaten there. But yes, I imagine being able to stay there, you just want to sort of take time to chill and relax and just enjoy the pool and enjoy the surroundings and the settings a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a gorgeous resort. And as you say, just to sit by it. I mean, it's February, so I don't know if I'll be getting pool time, but just enjoying that resort and spending time there, and it is really a really nice thing to do. And of course, Trader Sam's.
You can't not but go and mention Trader Sam's, of course. We've got to sneak that one in. Okay, let's move away from Walt Disney World because it sounds like you had an absolutely fantastic, unbelievable trip. I am so pleased that you were able to get there and do so many amazing things. I do know over the summer, though, you were incredibly busy bumping up those cruise trips and you had an array of the staycation experiences that us in the UK were able to do. And I thought, perhaps you could tell us a little bit about the different types of cabins you experienced, how you found the staycation yourself, any highlights as well.
Yeah, I mean, that was very much born out of the missing Disney terribly and not knowing when we were going to go back. So as soon as they announced they were doing these staycation cruises, it was a good friend of mine messaged me immediately and said, we have to do this. So I didn't take much convincing, having had so many Disney World trips cancelled. So what we actually did, we did the first cruise, the first proper paid passenger cruise. I think they did some test cruises before that, which was out of Liverpool. And that was, I'm trying to remember, I think it was a 4-night, it might have been a 3-night. And me and 2 of my female friends went, and we actually shared a cabin. We booked a guaranteed room, but got a bit of an upgrade. And so we had a veranda room, which we hadn't booked, which was great for that extra space, having 3 of us in there. And it was fabulous. That first cruise was, having done later cruises in the season, that first cruise was quiet. I think because it was the first paid cruise, they really did keep the numbers down. So it was noticeable when you were walking around the ship or in the restaurants. It was very quiet. And as the cruises went on through the season, and we did another one with all of our partners in the summer, I think it was July, we did one August, we did one out of Southampton. It was noticeably busier on the ship then, but still quieter than you would get on a regular cruise, and still an enormous amount of fun. And then we went on the final 2 sailings of the season, which were out of London Tilbury. We had all had trips booked to be at Disney World for the 50th. That obviously couldn't happen because the borders were still closed. So we decided to do that final cruise out of London Tilbury at the end of the staycation season so that we could celebrate the 50th on board. So we all had 50th anniversary t-shirts and ears, and we made sure we got to meet Mickey that day. We made sure we got to have a Mickey bar that day, and we just sort of celebrated the 50th with mimosas for breakfast and champagne at dinner. So that was our way of sort of giving a nod to the celebrations that were happening in Orlando that we unfortunately couldn't be at. But looking at the crowds on that day, we were probably in the best spot.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Have you ever done concierge on the cruise line?
Yes, yeah. We didn't on these staycation cruises because, to be honest, I didn't think that would be a great value to do it on staycation cruises, because when we've done concierge in the past, when I've been traveling with my husband, you know, we've used it very much as a way of getting a cabana on Castaway Cay, which we've been fortunate enough to do a couple of times. And also just for the help of booking excursions, booking those tastings on board, all of those things, which is an additional perk of travelling concierge. So we have done it before. Again, it's, if you actually sat and added it up and looked at the money, it's a lot. And, you know, ultimately just being on the ship is enough. But as a special treat, it's a wonderful, wonderful experience. And I've done everything on Disney Cruise Line. I've been on the cheapest inside cabin you can get, and I've sailed in concierge, and I've loved every single trip just as much as the next. And I would never hesitate to go back. It's not as if concierge has spoilt me and I wouldn't want to go back to an inside. I will go in any room, any category, any time to be on a Disney ship. So if it's a special treat, you know, for my 50th birthday, we booked concierge and that was a fantastic cruise. But I will just as happily go in an inside stateroom.
In the same theme park as you with that one, because at the end of the day, just get me on the ship, because all I'm really doing in the room is sleeping.
Exactly. And when you are out and about on the ship, you know, everybody gets treated the same. You get the same food, you get the same drink, you know, there's no difference. There's no sort of, I don't feel there's any sort of class system on a Disney ship. You know, you all get treated equally. What concierge gets you is, you know, a nice lounge. And again, if you enjoy a drink, you can have, you know, cocktails before dinner and drinks after dinner in the lounge, which are all included in your extortionate cruise fare. But other than that, you know, everything else is, you know, we're sitting in the same restaurants and, you know, it's no different. We're all eating the same food, but it's just somebody can help you get the Paolo Bunch reservation so you've not got to worry about it and get you that cabana on Castaway Cay.
What did you think to Paolo? Did you experience it on any of the staycations?
I did, and I preferred the bunch experience on the staycation cruises. I'm not a great lover of buffets. I'm probably quite lazy. I like people to bring me my food. And you do tend to overeat when there's a buffet. And so I actually really enjoyed And believe me, there was plenty of food. You did not leave there hungry. But I really enjoyed just sitting at the table, choosing off the menu, having dishes brought to us. To me, it was actually an improved experience. And then when we went with our partners on the August cruise, we did the dinner, and again, very enjoyable. The big difference I think that's changed now, which disappointed a couple of people in the group, was the calling it a cart doesn't seem the right word, but that beautiful sort of trolley that they bring round with all the meats and cheeses and antipasti on there, that they would serve pre-dinner. That doesn't happen now, so that's a bit of a shame. But I enjoyed both. If I had to pick one, if I could only do one, it would have been the brunch.
No, I'm completely with you. I loved the brunch. We had a side room because there was quite a few of us when we went, and the wait staff were just amazing. Like, they just brought a whole smorgasbord of the different antipasta sort of sharing plates that you could get. So we all just tucked in, and then we had different pizzas brought to us. We all tucked into that, and then we had our waffles and pancakes, and then we had our entrees, and then we tried to run away, and they kept bringing us more food. They brought out desserts, and then they said, do you want any more desserts? Do you want to try different dessert? And it was like, seriously, mate, I'm literally rolling out of this restaurant because you just wanted to. And it was, as you say, it's so relaxing to not have to think, I need to get up and get some more strawberries, or I need to go and get some more of this.
Yeah.
They just kept bringing it all to you. And I just felt it was a little bit more luxurious experience rather than wandering around with the swaying of the ship, trying not to drop whatever you mounted onto your plates.
I agree with you totally, and I think you hit the nail on the head when you said it felt like a more luxurious experience. It did to me. So I know a lot of people will miss the buffet terribly, and there were certain things that were on the buffet that you don't get on the menu now. But to me, just that, as you know, the wait staff in Paolo are next level. They're really the best of the best, and they really look after you. And you know, I anybody that I spoke to on those cruises, whilst we were on the cruises or after we got off and we were talking to other people that had experienced those Paolo meals, nobody said that they didn't enjoy it. Everybody said it was fantastic.
I completely agree. I think if you're going on a Disney cruise and you want to do one special thing, I think getting the brunch, as that really hard to get reservation, I must admit, because they're only available on your standard cruises on your sea days. It's a must do. It really, really is.
Yeah, absolutely. And if, you know, particularly if you're a first time cruiser or you haven't done many cruises before, if you do brunch rather than the dinner, it's not taking you away from one of those evening dining room experiences, which is so worth doing.
Yeah.
So doing the brunch actually gives you the best of both worlds. And for anybody who can't get a brunch reservation before they get on board, they always hold some back. So make it the priority once you get on the ship, to go to whichever area is taking dining reservations. One of the cast members will point you in the right direction, and hopefully you can get one once you're on board.
Completely good idea. And the same with regards to some of the drinks packages. People do cancel while they're on their ship as well, and you might be able to grab something, because there were so many different options on the staycations, from champagne to cognac to red wine, white wine, whiskey, all sorts of things. And I must admit, I probably booked more than I actually needed, and I did cancel a few in a few weeks up to the cruise as well. So keep checking. That's another top tip from me.
Yeah, definitely.
Right, my lovely. Thank you so much for spending this time chatting through this year's Disney trips with us. It's been an absolute delight.
The pleasure is all mine, Michelle. Thank you for asking me. There is nothing I love more than talking about Disney. So any opportunity to do it, I will do it. So thank you for inviting me on, and Happy New Year, and Happy New Year to all the listeners.
Thank you so much. Enjoy your February trip, and I think after that it'd be really good to do a bit of a top 10 favourite lounges with you, so I look forward to that, and maybe you might have to do some research in February for us.
Well, it's going to be a tough job, but it's a challenge I'm willing to take on.
Oh, I love it when I set these kinds of challenges to people, because do I have to go and eat really nice food and drink really nice cocktails in delicious surroundings?
Yeah, it's a hard life, isn't it? But somebody's got to do it.
Hey, mate, you work hard, you play hard. It, you know, do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Right, well, we will be back with another podcast next week. Fingers crossed, touch wood and all that malarkey. But until then, it's a goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.